Intersectional feminism isn't just for protests and posts. It belongs at the dinner table, at the playground, and in how we show up as caregivers. Today's episode is one that will sit with you long after it's over. We're diving into a powerful conversation about what it means to parent and live through the lens of intersectional feminism. Bonjour, and welcome back to Bloomera. My name's Brienne. And today's episode is equal parts truth-telling and gentle rebellion. It's an invitation to all caregivers and cycle breakers to redefine what having it all means on your terms. This isn't about perfection. It's about realness. It's about challenging the myths of good motherhood and exploring how radical conscious parenting can become a form of resistance, healing, and liberation. Whether you're a parent, thinking about becoming one, or healing your inner child, this conversation is for anyone reimagining what care, power, and equity can look like at home and beyond. Let's get into it. First of all, how can we redefine having it all as a woman and a mother in a way that prioritizes the women's well-being instead of just adding more to our plates?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't buy into like having it all anymore. I don't even know what that means, but it is a very real pressure. Like for myself, I don't know what it means for myself. It's a very real pressure that because we see a picture of like, we're millennials are often children of the working girl generation, of women who started working en masse, and white women, especially because women of color historically always worked, not always paid for their work. So having it all means like working and being a mom and like having hobbies or mental health, because it feels like sometimes we just like can't have all those things. We have to like choose one or two. And maybe my interpretation of having it all is choosing what matters instead of feeling like we have to do it all. And that means saying no to more stuff. And that's hard. And that sucks, especially if you're a people pleaser or an achiever and you're like, I can do all the things. Ask me how I know, because in the mental hospital, my psychiatrist and the social workers were like, okay, unsustainable lifestyle. We have to pare down like what's going to keep you healthy. Self-care is not like having a bubble bath. It's what are the very basic functions that you're not doing for yourself, because we can't have it all if we're not here, if we're not functional. So at least for me, a lot of this experience was like knowing what makes me feel like me. For me, that is having it all. Like, okay, what makes me feel like I have purpose? For me, it's writing, it's podcasts, like talking to women like you, and also my son, my family, gardening. Like what are the things that fill me up? We all have to do, chores and stuff, but having equity in our homes makes this a lot more possible. But I would say like redefining having it all. I would say instead, can we choose what matters and try to let go? Easier said than done of the things that don't matter as much.
No, I love that. It's not one size fits all for everybody, and it's not going to look the same in equal parts for everybody either.
And we all have different bandwidth, and we had different bandwidth at different times. For me, it was like I expected my bandwidth to be the same when I had severe recurrent depression as I did when I was like, I don't know, a graduate student without a child. And we all have different bandwidth, and our bandwidth changes.
The emotional spoon theory has been really helpful for me, and noticing that you don't have the same amount of spoons throughout the day. It's changed by what you're going through, what season of life you're in. And I think for me, having it all is super outdated. But if you're going to have that belief, I think the way for me to get there is leaning on my support system. There's a system to support you. You're never meant to do it alone. You're meant to have a system, a village, even if you don't have that village from birth, like we've talked about with mother wounds. But being able to rely on your partner, like you said, equity within the home, or not even expecting to do it all, which I think is important to model to your children as well.
Yeah. And in order to have a village, we need to be vulnerable enough to ask for help and receive it. I sucked at that, and I do often still. But after I was in the hospital this winter, I had people who knew what was going on, and they said, can I help you this way? A, B, C, D. And multiple times I had other women pull up to the gate in my driveway and drop off cooked meals. And one particular person was like, okay, like I'm going to make you lunches, because I know you said that you're like skipping lunch. You don't have the energy to make it. And like, that was the most, I felt so loved and held in that moment. And that's like what it means to be a village. One of those people was somebody who, when she had a baby last year, like I dropped off meals at her doorstep. And it was like, is the driveway drop off the ultimate sign of love and care in
I
our
think
village? Like, I think, and okay, what did I do? I turned around and used those lunches she made for me and like fed my family with them because I like was not in a place to cook. Yeah. And it's so hard to ask for help, but that's like what it means, is being vulnerable enough to take your turn. When it's your turn to need help, be okay with receiving it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And modeling that to others, both
Yeah.
the women in your life and your children.
Yeah.
What does feminist parenting mean to you, and how do you practice it in your own home?
Ooh, yeah, this is something I aspire to, and it's a practice, right? I'm annoying as fuck. That's one thing I know. Because I'm like, I will stop a podcast or like interrupt a book we're reading, and I will do a soliloquy about why that was like not historically accurate or like it's very gender stereotypical. And my goodness. Okay, so my son doesn't, he's very sensitive. He cannot watch Disney movies because the building of tension is like too much for him. He's like a documentary child. But okay, we tried to watch a Western one time because he was like, and I could not get through this, Brienne, because I would pause it and insufferably go on a whole tangent about like how Native people were portrayed. And it was like toxic masculinity. And I've just make things miserable for my family. And I will keep doing it because that's what feminist parenting means to me in some capacity. Also challenging gender roles. My husband is a physician, and there's a reason that a lot of people married to physicians don't work. I was so indignant about becoming like a doctor's wife, where I'm regularly like, I'm Dr. Larsen's wife. Like at functions in his medical capacity or being introduced to people, I'm like Dr. Larsen's wife, right? Like I don't have my own identity, and he's the breadwinner. And I kind of like scrape together my professional life with the help of like childcare and working during naps, right? I made it very clear, and we've had to work on this over time. Like, I'm not going to have our son grow up seeing that I'm like the domestic servant and you're the breadwinner. And that's how things are cut and dried in our home. So this has been a process of like us both recognizing what are the messages about our roles in our homes and parenting that have been like traditionally gendered and scripted, and how can we show our son something different. Like, so my husband just this month started cooking dinner, and it's fabulous. And also, this is something that my son learned from my husband a lot more than from me, I think, is that men can be vulnerable and express their emotions. And like, again, that's something that like I can't teach him. But my husband, who's like a manly dude, he's like a shaved head motorcycle riding, like tattooed guy. He talks about his emotions with our son, and he's had to learn to do that. And something really powerful for me, and I was pregnant during the Me Too movement at the height of it. And I was thinking a lot about like finding out I was having a boy. And something I was so intentional about from the beginning was teaching bodily consent early and often, about like, we're tickling and you say stop. I say, I heard you say stop. No means no in every circumstance. Even when we're playing, personal boundaries, space, like respecting other people's wishes, like those I think are some of the building blocks. And I'm an intersectional feminist. We talk a lot about like portrayals of race and gender. And again, people would consider me to be an insufferable feminist mom, but here I am.
I don't think that's annoying as fuck or insufferable
Okay.
at all. I think that's something that's really important to me in my household too, especially when it comes to media and a lot of the like older films, because some of the like childhood classics for us are kind of problematic. And
Yeah.
to be able to use it as a learning experience instead of just watching it and having those messages kind of ingrained in them, I think that's beautiful. And
Yeah. Thank you.
bodily consent, we do that in our household. I have a 2-year-old who he can speak a little bit better now, but at first, like, he understood respect my no. It came out like pick my nose, but it
Oh
was
my goodness.
respect my no. And that's something we do in this house too. It's really, really important to me that if somebody says stop, if somebody says no, that they recognize they need to stop, and also that they can say that to somebody else and know what to expect from the other person, that the other person should stop when you tell them to stop.
Yes. I think a big part of that is being able to tell your child the truth, age appropriate to some extent, right? But like my son knows what sex is and how babies are made. He knows what abortion is, and he knows why there are abortion protesters. And like he knows about, in fact, this says a lot about the person that he is. There is this clinic, but it's an abortion provider that's down the street from us. And there are often protesters outside, and he's asked me about that. And, he was asking, now I can read, he's like, why does it say my body, my choice? And when I tell him things like, okay, Wilder, we need to get in the bath, he will be like, my body, my choice. And I'm like, okay, respect your bodily autonomy. That is, unfortunately, we do have to bathe sometimes, but he's like, he gets it.
Yeah.
He gets it. He expects other people to respect his bodily autonomy. I hope that's a baseline that continues through his life.
I think it will be. I mean, I have to hope. I think change starts at home, and that's why we choose to be feminist parents, or even better, intersectional feminist parents.
Yeah.
We want to see that change in the world, and we're raising that change in the world.
Yeah. And luckily, there's a lot more like access we have to content, like documentaries or books, like online. We can find out about these things. And like children's books, I think being really intentional about representation has been a fun thing for me. But yeah.
We've got a lot of diversity in our books and toys, and also I have some books about bodily consent and what, what is safe, what is not. And that has been helpful. I mean, kids learn through play, they learn through books, they learn through experiences like that and the conversations that we have with them. So you're not insufferable. You're teaching them.
Thank you for correcting me. I think like someday I'm going to have a conversation with him about I am a survivor of sexual assault, and that I'm going to continue being honest with him at an age appropriate level, but I'm not going to keep from him the realities of like what his privilege means and the power that he has, and that he needs to use it appropriately and to keep other people safe.
Absolutely. I know.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges of raising children in a patriarchal society for you?
Oh, I think one of them, like I was, this is a great segue because his privilege, my son has two parents who are employed and have postgraduate degrees, and he's an only child, and he is white, and he's like got the privilege cards deck stacked for him in a lot of ways. And he already has an enormous privilege, and it's my job to get him to see that and make it visible. And like I was saying, I was pregnant during the height of the Me Too movement, and I listened to the Larry Nassar trial and, Harvey Weinstein getting held accountable, like when I was pregnant. And I had to think very intentionally about like the way I was going to bring up my white son to see his privilege and not let it just like be invisible, because when we can see our privilege, we can wield it intentionally. And I can give him as many messages as I want, but there are still other forces. Like he used to paint his toenails. Like when I would paint my nails, he wanted his nails painted. And now he's in a school where like he's made fun of if he has something pink. And it's like, how do I counteract some of those messages that he gets? Like, especially because I don't always know what messages he's getting. That's a huge responsibility. And yeah, in this political climate, I'm a work in progress with this.
I think we all
there are a lot of challenges. Yeah.
I've chosen to homeschool because I'm a gun violence survivor, and I just have a deep, deep fear of that. And I hope in 4 years things will start looking a little differently. But I'm not currently struggling or put in the position that you are with a child in school getting messages from other people. Right now, I'm kind of consistently around, and I mean, he's only 4, so that's kind of par for the course right now. But I'm just trying to instill that like pink and purple, like those are his favorite colors just by his choice. And I'm like, that's great. Let's buy you those purple sweatpants. Like they're for girls, but we don't like, it doesn't need to be a conversation. Like they're a size 5. Perfect. Let's get them for you.
They fit your body. You like them. End of conversation. I think one of the things that I've just noticed, the Oscars were recently, and we're watching them for a bit as a family. And because my husband and I consistently miss what movies are cool. And we really wanted to know like what movies one day we will watch. And criticizing women's appearances is such a constant undercurrent and narrative. And I was like, in one moment I stopped my husband and I was like, we're not going to be talking about how women age while we're watching this. Like you're hearing some of the announcers and like commentary talk about it, but like I interrupt the messages about body standards and beauty standards are like so proliferate and they're everywhere. And so like it takes a lot of intention to interrupt those messages.
And good for you. I was thinking too, again, that you were calling it annoying as fuck. My friend Emily, she's a podcast host of the Worthy Mother podcast. We have just recently reframed it from annoying as fuck to a fucking ray of sunshine. So like, I think that's what you are.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah. I think I default to like self-deprecation, but that's another thing is like, I have to be conscious of the way that my son views me and how I view myself translates to a lot of like like how he will view women at
Mhm.
large. That's why
Yes.
I am not going to be critical of like my age in front of him or like aging or my body. Because I don't want him to expect that that's like, oh, that's what women do.
No, absolutely. I actually really enjoy like pointing out like my little mustache hairs. And I'm like, hey, you see this? Yeah, women get hair on their face too. Like, you know how your dad has a mustache? Like, mama's got some hairs here. I like to get rid of them. Like, it's people's choice to keep them or not. Like,
Yeah.
having conversations about body hair and wrinkles and my postpartum body and like neither good nor bad, but it just is. And this is everybody's different and everybody's body is different. There's no good or bad, just removing all of that from it. But yeah, I get a little bit of
Yeah.
enjoyment because I'm like thinking of their future female friends or partners if they end up, you know, choosing a female partner. Like they're not going to
Yeah.
look at a little hair on the side of their lip like as the most disgusting thing in the world. They're gonna be like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Can you imagine like living as an adult or dating without having all of like that baggage?
Mm.
Or like dating people who didn't have an expectation of like no body hair or like six-pack abs or something. Like, oh
Mhm.
my gosh.
You know, I feel very fortunate with my husband. He is very much like that. And I think that's where I've learned to do a lot of that with him. My mother-in-law is incredible and she just embraces everything. She doesn't really try to change anything about herself. She doesn't have anything negative to say about herself. And I've learned a lot through watching her and seeing how it's impacted him. And he has also just made me feel a lot better about my body. I like to dye my hair just because I like to dye my hair. And every once in a while, he's like, why are you doing that? And if I mention it's because of the grays, he's like, just rock them. Like, it's great. And then I come to mind of conversations I've had with people who have gray hairs where I'm like, just do it. Like, the society tells you there's something wrong with it, but I think it's beautiful. They look like highlights. And I'm like, why can't I do that for myself?
Yeah. That's so hard. It's so helpful to have a good partner to like second guess those things. I'm 33. I'm in menopause. I have been for a couple of years, and I've had to like there's so many things about like weight gain and wrinkles and like feeling like biologically I'm 65. And so, oh man, yeah, I'm like constantly trying to monitor my dialogue around those things because like I'm sending him messages in real time about what it means for women to age.
Okay, how can we, this is a two-part question. I'll start with sons. How can we raise emotionally intelligent sons in a patriarchal world? And I know you mentioned a little bit with your husband modeling, and maybe that's the answer. That's the most powerful example. But what other things do you do?
My son loves the Olympics and seeing men competing and having big feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't call them like good or bad emotions, but saying like, wow, you can see like how he must have worked so hard. He must be like really proud of himself, or he must be so disappointed. And labeling emotions, putting words to those things are so important. My son just learned that he has a lock on his bedroom door and he will slam his door now, which must be so satisfying and feels so powerful to like lock me out. I do know how to pick locks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying not to do that because there's not a safety issue, but he
Yeah.
like he was telling me yesterday through his locked door, I'm feeling mad and sad at the same time. And I'm like, wow, I actually don't think that like I could have used even those words
Mm-hmm.
to describe, especially, yeah. We talked about women in anger, but it's really powerful to hear a 6-year-old be able to articulate, like, I feel disappointed. And so I also really validate him and like use his language when he describes his own emotions and really try to reinforce that that's a good thing.
That's really great. How can we empower daughters in a patriarchal world?
That's a good question. And when I don't have to think about the question in quite the same way every day, though I do not raise my son in a way that I try not to impress like traditional gender on him, but I think the same things all apply. Like knowing that all emotions are good, that we can make choices about how we display them, but that anger means that maybe someone you have been trod upon, right? Anger's okay. And all of our emotions are valid. But there's an added pressure raising daughters in a patriarchy, I think, to like counteract some of the messages that they get about what a woman's role is. And we need a lot of examples of women who counteract that. If you have a daughter, I think it's probably also, I imagine, an added pressure to like be a good example yourself of
Mm-hmm.
standing up for yourself, right? And like defining your boundaries and
Not always caretaking, taking those
no, not
moments,
always caretaking.
like you mentioned before, and
Yeah.
self-care in whatever way that looks like, not always bubble baths, but
Yeah.
able to give back to yourself instead of just always caring for other people.
Yeah, I one huge mistake that I realized I made last year is I ran a half marathon. I've been an endurance runner for a long time. my medical challenges have made it really hard. And I had an injury and ran through the pain for months. I finished the race. I actually like beat my goal time. And then I went to the emergency room the next day. I had my hip was fracturing and I like chose to run on it. And because like I said, I have like issues with just forcing myself to grit my way through things. And I realized actually like in the mental hospital, one of the counselors was like, do you think that that was a good example to set? And I was like, actually, no, it wasn't, because like showing your child, any gender, that rest is productive, like I'm sending him the wrong message by just like choosing to ignore the signs that my body's sending me.
And hurting yourself more in the long run to reach a goal, whereas taking care of yourself should be the ultimate goal.
Yeah, like honoring the things that your body needs. I was only eating about like 60% of the calories that I needed. I'm in nutrition therapy now. But that was in the spring of last year. And like, yeah, I've really had to make changes to show him what self-care really means. Base level, hydrating, eating, fueling your body, resting. Seems so basic.
No, it does, but it has been ingrained in us that those things aren't so basic and they're negotiable and depend on the day and what you've eaten or how you look. Like, and it shouldn't be that way. Those are big human needs.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have criticism from other people or if you receive criticism, but if you do from either family or society when choosing to parent in an intersectional feminist way, how do you handle that criticism?
I get dogged on the internet constantly. That was something that I had to set boundaries around when I was in the hospital. My social workers were like, you have to do something about that. So I have set like more boundaries from internet misogyny just to protect myself. But one time I went to a cherry festival and my son was waiting in line for a cherry lemonade with me and it was super hot and he was getting, he was saying like, I'm so tired and my legs hurt. Can you hold me? And I was holding him and he was 4. And I'm always thinking like, I'm going to hold him as much as I can because there's going to be a day where he doesn't want to be held anymore. But he's saying he has a need. I'm going to satisfy that need. And a cowboy standing behind me, like older guy, he was like, you're being a little baby. Mama's not always going to be able to hold you like that. Or like you're babying him. And he was just like, had this monologue from like behind me in line and I was getting the damn lemonade. So I was not leaving the line. And my go-to response is, like, tell me more about that. And I will be silent and I will wait for their response. Like, yeah, like asking them, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, just back in my day, that little boys weren't sissies. And I'm like, why? And I will just make them, and I'm almost 6 feet tall, and I will just stand there and I will wait for a response. And I've done this in Costco and caused a scene when I was sexually harassed, and I will just like not budge. And it's my anger that's like bolstering me. And I know that I'm not going to like change anybody's mind in the moment, but like asking people to examine their own misogyny and stereotypes and judgments, they never really have an answer. It's always like, well, when I was growing up, or that's the way we did it. There's really like no good reasoning behind it. And I always think like, especially like when I have been groped or like sexually harassed, like I will respond to it and like call them on the carpet for it. And it just at least makes me think that they'll think twice before they do that again. And it has, like, I said that in the line at Costco, after an older man sexually harassed me in front of my 3-year-old son, who's like sitting in the cart in front of me. Like, I just turned around and told him, like, I'm not going to let you talk to me that way in front of my son. And I caused a scene, but I was very calm.
Yeah, no, and those are the times, like we talked about, that anger is just and necessary and is an appropriate response. I was at a situation where I was at a party and there was a white man making racist, sexist jokes and jokes about violence against women. And I was calling him out left and right, not letting it slide, not letting it be okay. And I was met with sexual assault, and like being able to report that and stand up for myself, whether or not you're changing that other person, like you're making them think twice. You're not letting them get away with it. And hopefully you're changing them. But if not, you are teaching yourself and your children. And it really helped me to look at the situation from like my child child, either being on the receiving end of it or being an adult, and like, what would I want for them? Would I want them to stand up for these things? Would I want them to speak out against these things? Would I do it for them? And that helps me a lot too.
I'm so sorry that happened. And I agree with you that like even if we're not changing anybody's mind, like you grow a tolerance for standing up for yourself. And like that's a skill.
And it helps you in the
To,
long, like you said, it's a
yeah.
skill you're building.
Yeah. And to be able to do it like from a place of calm. I told my therapist several years ago, that's my ultimate goal. If somebody is like harassing me, like shouting in my face, that I can remain calm enough to respond instead of react. So I won't go to jail.
Yeah.
But also just like that's growth, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I think that I wasn't a host in it by any means, but I did a feminist webinar around the time of elections, and it was online advocacy or activism. And it was talking about how to handle when people are fighting with you online and fighting opinions. And they kind of framed it in a way where it's like, how can you teach other people? If you can't teach this person, the people who are going to hear it, who are going to listen and read it and absorb it, how can you educate them? Because their minds might be a little bit more open than the person who is the loudest, most obnoxious person on the comment thread.
Yeah, that's a skill set. And especially if you're doing it as a brand, like it's sometimes hard to be intentional. I'm known to clap back, but I think like I will often do it as I'll screenshot a comment and I will make an Instagram carousel explaining like some person was like, what the fuck are you doing about patriarchy? And or like, define patriarchy, and I will make a slideshow. I will make an Instagram carousel defining the history of it, and other people might read it and like, I don't know, share it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're like, thank you for the content.
Yeah, 100%. You saved me.
Yeah.
Brainstorm.
Yeah. And just turning something so negative into something positive. I mean, that's change making. Like you're taking the bad and you are alchemizing it into education, and somebody else is going to feel seen and heard and learn something through that. More is going to be gained than was lost from that. And like, what did the person do? They helped further the cause that they were putting.
Yeah, totally. Just recently, I had a man who's a boudoir photographer tell me, comment something about like how I need to stop eating. And I was like, excellent. That is the laziest insult of all time. And like very predictable, 0 out of 10. But also like I'm going to use the opportunity to make a real respond to him. And I didn't tag him, and I don't care if he sees it or not, because I'm really speaking to everybody else about like, why do people with the misogynist attitudes always talk about our weight first? And like, why is it such a low blow and also like so predictable? And a lot of people messaged me and were like, I feel so seen. I'm like, great, perfect. I reached the audience.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And you were able to take, even if it was a moment of like hurt or pain, or maybe you brushed it off entirely, and that's beautiful, but like you were able to connect with somebody else. And we all experience that, maybe different degrees. You're online and you're experiencing that a lot more, but some of these people who are reading it may be experiencing it in their lives or just in passing at work. And you're able to give a voice, like you said, you love being able to read books and find yourself in there and find your experiences and your feelings, and you're doing that for other people. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. That is my why. That is my great driver. And I hope that I can return the favor. People who've done it for me.
If you could give one piece of advice to women trying to step into their power, what would it be?
This is a really hard question. I love that this is so challenging, because one piece of advice. I think if we're going to wait for a permission to step into our anger or our power, it's never going to come. So one of my favorite quotes is from Shirley Chisholm. And I think it was around the time that she was trying to make a run for president. But she said, if no one gives you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And it's like, bang, folding chair, slamming it down. It's like, I'm making my own seat. I'm not waiting for anyone to invite me to do this. And yeah, don't wait for permission. Maybe stepping into your power is like, I'm going to have a hobby and I'm going to carve out time for that. Or like, I'm going to set boundaries with my mom. Like the world is not going to wait to give you permission. You have to bring a folding chair and not use it like a WWE fighter necessary to like bash someone over the head, but like to sit in.
Yes. Make space for you and show up at the table.
Yeah. You have to make space. Like for me, that's online. Some books, some writing. But yeah, that quote I think about that a lot.
That's a good one. I'm taking that one in.
Yeah.
Well, I am so grateful for your vulnerability and all of your wisdom and the jokes along the way. I very much enjoyed this conversation, and I have a feeling there's going to be more in the future.
I would love that.
Yes. I also don't think that I acknowledged your vulnerability about your recent experience with your mental health. And I am just really grateful that you're able to open up about that you're doing better, that you're taking care of yourself, and that you're sharing it with other people. That takes a lot of courage. It's like we talked about earlier with the stigmatized mental health world for women. You are breaking through that. And that's one of my favorite things about your podcast and the work that you do. And it really shined throughout this interview and in everything that you do.
Thank you. And same to you. I think like we can't really show up with a folding chair for our kids, for anybody, if we're not taking care of our own needs. And like going to the mental hospital is a very dramatic way to, all you can do is focus on your own needs. You have to eat, you have to take your medicine, you probably have to shower, you have to go to therapy. Those are the only things that you can do. And like that's radical self-care.
Yeah.
If your insurance will allow it. Going to, and I had a lot of people tell me like, I'm a mom, I fantasized about that. I went, it kept me from taking my life. And this is another taboo.
I'm glad you did it, and I'm glad that we're here having this conversation.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with me for another episode of Blue Mara. If you have any questions or topics that you want to talk about, I have a link in the episode description with a community survey. You can fill it out anonymously or have your name mentioned in the episode that it inspires. I'll see you in the next episode.